recently there was a poll regarding who's the GOAT. They had MJ, LeBron, Kobe, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And one of the things that was striking was that Jordan got 70% of the vote of being the GOAT. And a lot of people, basketball contemporaries, are very upset about that. One thing I could possibly say about this poll is this. It's a generational change. A lot of people that are taking these polls never saw 80s basketball, 90s basketball. Most of them are stuck in the 2000s and 2010 era, whatever the case of basketball. The guys that saw that basketball 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, these guys are 80 years old now, 70 years old. They're not on Twitter, they're not on Instagram, they're not taking these polls. So there's a generational change, a generational gap. You ask a player about Oscar Robertson, a person about Oscar Robertson today, they're not gonna really say much. Some of them might say triple double, but there's been so many great players from Dantley to Vinnie Microwave Johnson to John Stockton, Carl. There's a lot of players that people just don't know about. Like John Stockton and Carl. Those are Hall of Fame players. If you ask somebody, is he one of the greatest point guards? They're gonna tell you no. When in fact he is considered one of the greatest point guards due to his assist turnover ratio. He has one of the lowest in NBA history, point blank period. So the people taking this polls, you gotta take a poll like this with a grain of salt. But what this poll tells me is like Jordan's sneaker brand has really locked up the market in terms of him being the GOAT. Because a lot of these people that are taking these polls or making their argument or saying that Jordan has a 70%, they don't I bet you they couldn't even tell you Game 6 Utah Jazz what he did there or the flu game. They couldn't tell you none of that stuff. All they could tell you is they're rocking shoes, and that's basically what's influencing their vote. For somebody like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to get 1% of the vote, it's crazy. But like Kobe and LeBron gets like 11%, Kobe gets 10%. How is that so? When you look at Kareem, he has 6 rings and 5 MVPs, same as Jordan. So like you definitely ain't watching the game, or you don't know the history of the game to be giving out votes like this. Like Larry Bird didn't get much of any votes. Like Magic didn't get much of votes. Like you really gotta take something like this with a grain of salt. Like I agree that Mike is the greatest, but for him to be 70% the greatest when the past 5 or 6 years people have been saying LeBron is the GOAT, LeBron's gonna pass MJ as the GOAT. That's all we've been hearing. But now you take a poll and we see something has changed. What has changed? Nothing. It's just like people are just taking their answer and they're just basing it off of popularity. Like now, when we talk about the game basketball and popularity, even though LeBron is very, very popular in the sport of basketball, he's not more popular than Mike. He's not. He's probably more polarizing than Mike, I would say, but he's not more popular. He's not more liked and beloved than Mike. People love LeBron, but people name their kids after Michael Jordan. People have not paid their light bill because of Michael Jordan just to get those new shoes or whatever the case is. So I think it's kind of incredible if you think about it, because when you look at the recency bias of how everybody has been saying LeBron is the GOAT, but then when you take the poll and 70% are saying like, no, Mike is the GOAT, it just goes to show you that, like I said, the sneaker influence, but the influence of Mike, and then just the fact that a lot of these people don't know much about basketball. I'm gonna keep it 100. I'm gonna keep it a buck. For you to say like 70% of the vote that this person is the best player to ever, 70%, but every single day on shows like First Take, Behind the Lines, First Things First, people are arguing that LeBron is better than Jordan. That just goes to show you like people basically just follow they blow with the wind. They're not really thinking like this person is better than this person, and here is why. Mike is the greatest. They're not gonna tell you because they're not his shows. His shoes. They're just gonna say 6 rings. But like, what about 5 MVPs? What about 2 3-peats? What about averaging 30 for his entire career? What about beating a whole bunch of Hall of Fame players? Like, they won't mention that kind of stuff. What about being the first player to win an MVP and a Defensive Player of the War? Him and Hakeem Olajuwon, the only two players in NBA history, I think, to get an MVP and a Defensive Player of the Year award in the same season. Talk about that. Don't just talk about 6 rings. Because you're just perpetuating that argument that is, even though it's the valid, to me, that's the platinum standard. There was much more to Mike than just the 6 rings. So I think there's much more to Mike than just the sneakers. See, everybody gets caught up in the popularity, forgetting that Mike was a bad man, but that goes to show you about all the other players. When you see somebody like Larry Bird not getting basically any votes or whatever, or Kareem getting like 1% or less than 10%, but Kareem was a bad guy, bad boy too. Five MVPs, 6 rings, 1 with the Bucks, 5 with the Lakers, unstoppable move with the skyhook. So when you're looking at stuff like that, you really gotta take the poll with a grain of salt, and you gotta really think about it like this. A lot of those people making those votes and stuff, they just don't know a lot about the history of basketball. Period. Like, I grew up in an era where just because Mike was the best player, that doesn't mean he was your favorite player. You know what I'm saying? Like, today, like, everybody's basing it on who's the best, and that's their favorite player. And they move with the team or whatever. They move their allegiance based on where the player goes. Where I grew up, you stay with your team. You see what I'm saying? You can have a favorite player of another team, but you stay with your team. You know, I know people that will tell you Allen Houston's the best. I know people that'll tell you Eddie Jones is one of the best, point blank, like that. And that's what I'm talking about, where somebody could really have an intelligent conversation about the game and tell you reasons other than somebody's popular of why they think they're the greatest. And now you got to factor in the age of the people taking these polls. You got to factor in a lot of them didn't get to see a lot of the great play. And a lot of people they're not going back into the archives. All this stuff is on YouTube for you to watch. You could go watch finals of the 80s, 90s. You could go see how rough and rugged that basketball was and see some of the great players that Mike had to play against. LeBron early in his career, Kobe had to play against. There are a lot of great players that essentially they just get pushed by the wayside. And I think, to me, it's mainly focused on just popularity. It really is a popularity contest. People aren't telling you. A lot of people don't even know Kareem has 5 MVPs or 6 championships. A lot of people don't even know that kind of stuff. So, that being said, I do agree with Mike being the greatest. It's just the fact that it's a landslide. It's kind of crazy when you look at other players that will average 30 for his career as well. You look at Kareem. He's the all-time points leader. For it to be a 70 and then the next person to be 10%, it's crazy when you think about all the smack people been talking about Mike recently, how he's not the greatest, LeBron's the greatest, but now you guys flipped it on us. So it just goes to show you how wishy-washy people are, and when the rubber hits the road, they're just gonna say Mike is the greatest, point blank period. And I agree with it, but I can tell you multiple reasons why Mike is the greatest. Only thing they're gonna tell you is 6 rings. Hoops Junction, where hoops meets hoopla. Like, comment, and subscribe.